Hi, everybody. How are you? I am Dr. Sharon Cook. I am your host of the ProcureSmart podcast. Welcome to the show today. Today, we are going to talk to Jim Grundy, and he is a supply chain expert in trucking and logistics. And the topic of today's conversation is going to be the trucker strike in Canada. What is happening? What are some solutions? How is it impacting us? And so, yes, stay tuned for that. We are sponsored by the ProcureSmart Purchasing Agency, my agency. If you have a renovation, conversion, or new construction happening in 2022, 2023, we would love to help you with that. Give us a chance. We will do great work for you at a great rate. Okay, everybody, stay tuned. All right, everybody, we are back with Mr. Jim Grundy. He is our guest today. He is the owner of Texan Transport and SISU Energy. Is that correct?
Yes. Currently at SISU Energy, Texan was our first company we started, and that's actually in litigation right now, so we won't discuss that a whole lot. But
okay. Well, Jim, thanks for joining us. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about yourself?
Yep. Jim Grundy, CEO and owner of SISU Energy. That's pronounced SISU, SISU. It's a European term. Been in business here at SISU since 2019, October 2nd. And then it's been a wild roller coaster from the pandemic to oil and gas plunging to now it's skyrocketing. And now we have world on the brink of chaos.
Right. And we're going to talk about that. But before we do that, a couple of things I wanted to get through. One is SISU Energy is actually doing something with the smart technology. Is that right? I had read that you guys were doing something different.
So at the end of the day, people are asking you, on its surface, we look like a trucking company. People ask us, what kind of company do we have? I tell them that we're an IT asset management company. We actually own 0 trucks, 0 trailers. We have no assets besides people, technology, and a platform. That's really smart. Not tooting my own horn, but it works. We have drivers making over $20,000 a week revenue, taking home $15,000 a week every week by clockwork. We've been doing this for quite a while, which is why we've grown so fast. But we just launched a new application called SISU Clear, kind of a play off CISO Clear, and it's a transparency app intended to push information or allow drivers to pull information to them as they see fit, which we think is kind of the first of its kind that allows in our space someone to initiate conversation outward in, where most of your apps are designed to go inward out, pushing information on the people whether they want it or not. This one has we've reverse engineered the utility of what the application means to a driver. And it's a smart technology. It's wound integrated inside our operating platform. And we can manage about, for every 60 trucks, 1 employee. And, if you go to some of the major carriers, usually your ratio is about 16-1 trucks to employees. But our technology is smart and so efficient. We're constantly upgrading it. We're about 60-1 right now. That's
amazing. All right. So the reason I reached out to you, one, you have highly recommended, what's happening in trucking, what's happening in logistics. What I wanted to know, and some of my listeners wanted to know, we hear so much about what's happening in Canada with the truckers and the trucking strike. And I was hoping somebody of your caliber could explain to me what's happening. What is the major overall issue that the truckers are requesting? What's the struggle that they're having? And then we'd like to talk about what is that doing for us here in the U.S.
So there's about 35,000 truckers that come across the Canadian-U.S. border, shared border. That's originating in Canada, products originating there, delivering in the U.S., at which the Canadian driver would either pick up a load to go back across to his residence or his starting point. But Canada has a unique requirement that if you aren't vaccinated, you have to wait 14 days at the border in quarantine. So these truckers, while they're doing commerce on behalf of Canadians and keeping that economy going, they feel like they're being blackmailed and coerced into making a health decision on a personal level, and you have the by impacting their financials, the government, Canadian government is saying you can't earn a living without doing X. Well, if you think about it from a trucker's point of view, they're in the cab of a truck, they're isolated, they don't interact with anybody but themselves. These are over-the-road truckers. They don't touch the product. The trailers are sealed from pickup to delivery. They have no idea what they're delivering more times than not. They're, what we call bumping docks, dock to dock. They're just delivering product. And their question is, why do we need to be vaccinated? It's a personal choice. And why can you mandate that from a central government standpoint? And they just think it's an infringement on individual freedoms.
So
you have
Jim,
the government that's dictating people's health.
Is this Canadian truckers and U.S. truckers have to be vaccinated?
If a U.S. trucker needs to go into Canada, they have to be vaccinated, yes.
Right. And if a Canadian trucker comes into the U.S. and then tries to come back to go home, they have to be vaccinated.
Or wait 14 days.
Or wait 14 days. Okay. And I haven't seen an update. The Ukraine has kind of consumed the news this last week, but is that still happening? Is that still the strike still going on?
No. The Canadian government backed off as we saw the caravan across Canada. It was pretty well documented. But really what it's done is it started a conversation about the sanctions imposed by the Canadian government, and now it's kind of trickling over in the U.S. Central government, for the most part, has really done a bad job of regulating trucking industry here in the U.S. and it's handicapped a trucker's ability to make a living. What a lot of people don't realize is these truckers are individual owners. They're business owners. Whether they're driving it, they own the asset. Just like here at SISU, we hire only owner operators, right? So what that means is these guys are paying corporate taxes, and they have to go by the guidelines of the FMCSA, DOT. They're so regulated state over state. California and Texas, for instance, is a great example. Trucks in Texas, 99% of the time, won't even qualify to drive in California due to the emissions, right? So every state you go into, there's all kinds of different requirements, and we've just made it to the point where it's not attractive for truckers to join to truck anymore, even though folks like us are making $500,000 per truck a year. They just made it to the point where it's not an attractive option, and yet the guys that work for us at SISU make more than Wall Street hedge fund managers, right? And it's like, why aren't more people talking about these opportunities? We have 150,000 trucker shortage in the U.S. alone. Right. With Canada, you're about 200,000 truckers short, and we wonder why the prices are skyrocketing. It's not a binary relationship between truckers and oil. Oil is a problem. Supply chain's a problem. The infrastructure, truckers as a supply is a problem. And you put all these things compounded into a global economy, and you're seeing it. This is stagflation like we've never seen, probably, and it's going to continue for the next probably 2 to 3 years minimum.
Right. And that is one of the things that I had wanted to talk to you about. When I have interviewed people about the supply chain, one of the things that comes up is, listen, during the pandemic, we lost a ton of truckers.
Yeah, you have behind every small business, mom and pop shop, when we think about all the companies that went out of business around the pandemic, if you close your eyes and you think about what companies left the industry, what did you just picture? Probably a small mom and pop restaurant or a small retail shop or whatever. But the reality is 40% of oil and gas companies shut down completely and never came back in 2020. That's just oil and gas, and that's a very wealthy environment. Most companies in our space make a lot of money. The amount of restaurants that went out of business, it's unbelievable, right? So behind every one of these companies, there was a trucker bringing products to and from in some capacity. Everybody's selling something. When you take all these companies out of the market, truckers no longer have a product to move. So while we have a shortage, we kind of did this a little bit to ourselves without knowing it. Everyone was sent home to quarantine. all these companies lost business. Truckers lost the ability to do their job. A lot of them lost their trucks. They retired. They found their lines of work, and they moved on. And you think, okay, well, 150,000 truckers short just in the U.S. what they're estimating. That doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it is. When you don't have trucker schools where they're teaching, new truck drivers or recruiting or bringing people on. Why? Because we're all in quarantine.
Right.
The pandemic, all the classrooms closed around the country. So for 2 years, we haven't had a classroom of new drivers. So this deficit is only going to get worse. It's not going to get better. It's going to continue to go 150 to 180 to 200,000 truckers here by the next year. More and more drivers. It's a very aging workforce, anyways. It's an older workforce. They're going to continue to retire. And then the other problem we have is no one can find truck parts. And truck sales are so limited. See, we think about the Fords and Chevys, and you go by these car dealerships and they're empty. Well, it's the same thing for diesel trucks, right? So right now, your lead time on a diesel truck is 9 to 15 months. If you order one today, brand new, and the price on those is 6 figures. And then you think, okay, well, what about diesel parts? Just to find a part to fix current trucks, they're almost impossible to find. We're waiting months and ordering parts from around the world. Therefore, we're still losing capacity day in and day out. And we don't have the infrastructure or the recovery ready to facilitate the demand that's going on, not just in the U.S., but around the world. It's not there. It's not going to be there for a bit either.
So this is exactly the information I was hoping to hear from you. Not necessarily good information. I mean, not what you want to hear, but it explains a lot of what's happening out there. This is not a one finger problem. This is like a spider web of all these different struggles that these truckers are facing.
Yeah. It's a lot of folks want to say like, hey, what's going on with the rising cost of fuel, the rising cost of groceries or wood or meat? Those are symptoms. And a lot of folks want to say, well, what's causing, look at that symptom. Well, let's get to the root cause of the problem here. And the root cause of the problem is the things that we just mentioned. You've got a global supply chain infrastructure problem that was exacerbated by the pandemic. And when all these countries shut down, well, they turn the switch back on. Everybody's open for business. And half the companies didn't come back. Half the employees haven't come back to work, or they've moved on. And it's incredible. It's been an incredible sociological experiment. And I would be interested, if we could do it over again, if we'd have the same reaction, because I don't know. I know this is morbid, but we talk about what's going to cost more lives. So shutting down, did to save lives, or does economic crisis, and this is a crisis, and we'll talk about that in a second, but you have 45% of the United States citizens are on fixed incomes of some manner, right? Mm-hmm. Over 60% folks or would consider themselves barely getting by. 80% of folks in the United States live check to check. You think about the cost of inflation. Oil's up 48%, food's up 37%, meat's up 21%. All these things are skyrocketing right now, yet people on fixed incomes, their budgets aren't moving up. They can't afford it. Your rent is going up exponentially year over year in all your major markets. How are these people going to continue moving forward and thriving that are on fixed incomes or government assistance? It's not sustainable. Right. So that's the scary part from our point of view, is like, hey, while SISU Energy is doing incredible things, we also have to be cognizant that there's a big chunk, about 160 million Americans out there that are on government assistance that need help, that are on fixed incomes that, they can't afford these the cost of goods increasing at the rate they are. It's going to be catastrophic, really.
Right. And you mentioned that this really is a crisis. Did I lose sound?
I can hear you. You were saying?
Okay, there you go. I was going to say, and you had mentioned that this really has turned into a crisis.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's they're not going to use that word in front of us, but when you look at the macro effects of what stagflation and hyperinflation does to an economy over a period of 8-10 years, the macro effects are not pretty. We're not talking about 7% year over year. We're talking about 7% month over month right now. Right. It's the fastest inflation we've had since 1982. We had the highest increase in goods and services since 1960s. And scary enough, we just rolled out a 7% wage increase for our staff. And next month, that might not be enough. And so we're going to put more and more pressure on these companies to foot the bill for the inflation piece. And meanwhile, that's the working Americans. How about, like we just said, people that can't work, that are retired or on fixed incomes? What do they do?
Right.
You know, we all have parents, and you know, hopefully they're okay. But the reality is, you know, a lot of people out there, you know, don't have the ability to provide for themselves anymore, or are past the age to do that. You know, and it's just one of those. It's one of those things. It's a crisis. It's really sad because people are going to suffer, and I think it's the part in all this that we're ignoring.
So, in your opinion, what needs to happen? What are some of the steps that can be taken to alleviate this unlabeled crisis?
The cool thing about a crisis is also another good word for that. It's an opportunity. On the backside of this, we can look at this as an opportunity, and it's an opportunity for folks that want to change their life and make money and get back on their feet, to look at supply chain, transportation in some capacity. Whether you know, our dispatchers make anywhere between 55 to 75,000 a year. We have recruiters making six figures. Drivers making $500,000 a year. Right now, supply chain is at an all-time low for North America, which means that's when you buy. So for someone that's going to school or someone wants a new job, or you know, you need to learn a new skill set, this industry is starving for people that want to come in and help fix the problem. That's number one. So we need an influx of talent in supply chain, not just in the U.S., but globally. Second part, we have to get regulators out of these truckers' pockets, right? We always talk about, we incentivize big business to come to the U.S. by way of tax incentives and other programs. Let's do the same thing for truckers. How about we reduce the tax burden on truckers that are out there? As we can see, when truckers stop working, everything stops, right? I think as a sign of appreciation and to get more people in the industry, maybe the U.S. government needs to start taxing our truck drivers. And I know that sounds so matter of fact, but the reality is they're paying 36 to 40% of all their money. And meanwhile, you have folks like Amazon that are paying $0. And that's a tough pill to swallow, considering the quality of life these guys live. A lot of them aren't home 8-9 months a year, and making sure that they're delivering products so we can consume at the rate we are. So that's a good option. And then I'd also look at regulating insurance companies, as insurance companies are the ones that really dictate who can and can't work for companies. So if you want what they call A+ paper, A+ insurance, which everybody does, some people can't afford it. We have A+ paper, but if you have A+ paper, that's an insurance company telling you that you can't have anyone under the age of 25 working for you. So we just limited our driver pool substantially. All the new drivers that are coming out of school wouldn't qualify for us. They're too young, or they don't have 2 years experience. You know, so if you don't have insurance, your risk goes substantially higher as a company, and no one's going to take on that risk in this day and age, where even if you're not at fault, if you're a commercial vehicle, you're going to get sued and you're going to lose. You're going to lose in court, even if a pedestrian pulled out in front of you. So there's just a lot of things right now stacked up against truckers and supply chain that I think the federal government could look at, or even states could look at, and make things more attractive to people to come behind a diesel truck.
I'm learning so much. Thank you for taking the time to explain this. Okay, so I want to get your opinion. Over the weekend, obviously, the Ukraine is all over the news, and I had listened to somebody who said, listen, this is going to have a major impact on our oil supply. And I don't quite understand the supply chain there, but what do you know about it, and how do you feel about it? Are you worried about it?
Like 55 million barrels of oil a day from Russia. Even during this conflict, we're still doing it, right? Now, the scrutiny with all the banking regulations and all the eyes on Russia, there's a great chance that's going to stop here in the very near future, if it hasn't already happened in the background. They just haven't announced it. we're the largest buyers of Russian oil in the world, right? We import more Russian oil than from any other country in the world. So the relationship between U.S. and Russia is an energy-based platform. Our relationship with Ukraine is a very democratic an alliance platform, as we've been lobbying to get them in NATO for quite a while. So now you have a situation where our biggest provider of energy, and when we think about energy, is like, we pump oil, we pump more oil here in the U.S. than any other country in the world. Why are we exporting our oil and importing Russian oil? It's because it's all different product. Every refinery makes a different type of product. In the U.S., we specialize in distillates, diesels, gasolines, right? So that's what we export once it's completed, and we import a refined crude oil. That's what's coming from Russia. So you think, well, why don't we just find a new partner? Why don't we just buy 55 million barrels from elsewhere? The only other player big enough that could support that type would be Iran. That's the problem, right?
Okay.
We don't want to buy from Iran. We need to limit our exposure to Russia. What do? Well, we could open the pipeline that produces 80 million barrels a day in the U.S., North America. But what about the climate? We're fracturing now all over the place, all over America, and it's something that people don't raise their hand and talk about. But if we didn't do that, folks would have no electricity because we don't have the infrastructure for an electric grid. You're already seeing Texas is the highest producing energy provider in the U.S. What happened last year? We got decimated by one cold front that came through, shut down the whole state. It happened again last week. Half of Texans lost their power. We didn't have enough watts to support the demand. So we talk about putting all these electric cars on the road and replacing all the petroleum-based products. It's just not realistic right now. You're still probably anywhere from 50 to 100 years away from taking on that endeavor and having that kind of infrastructure to support an electric grid that would be required to support everything we're talking about. But yeah, there's some things they could do. Unfortunately, politically, these items have been weaponized. And I'm apolitical, neither here nor there, but yeah, there's oil in Alaska. We have oil all through the western part of Canada. The pipeline would bring 80 million barrels a day. It would drop prices right now. It would drop prices probably by 40 to 50% at the pump, yet the U.S. refuses to do so, and we continue buying from Russia and negotiating a deal with Iran, which fundamentally doesn't make sense to us.
Right.
In our industry, it doesn't make sense.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for explaining that to me. All right. So are you still looking for drivers?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. SISU Energy, we're the largest provider of frac sand with pneumatic trailers. A pneumatic trailer is a different type of trailer that uses airflow and pressure to blow sand off down a hole. The use for fracturing, we do hundreds of millions of pounds a day, but we're the largest in Texas, the Southwest U.S., and probably in the U.S., growing at an incredible clip. We come in every day to anywhere from 30 to 50 applications. We have about 250 spots left that we're looking for. Our top earners are doing $500,000 to $750,000 a year in revenue. They take home 83% of that. Our average guys are doing $400,000 to $500,000 revenue a year. So there's a little bit out there for everybody. It just depends on what it is you want. And really, if like we talked about, all the requirements needed to get in our industry, it's the insurance companies dictating that. So it comes a lot of times 95% of the folks that apply don't qualify because either their age, their experience, or they don't have the qualifications.
So how could somebody get a hold of you? How would you like them to reach you?
Go to our webpage. Honestly, we've made this so user-friendly and kind of a one-stop shop. It's www.sisuenergyllc.com. That's SISU Energy LLC.com. They can call us 817-717-1616. If you're interested in hearing more from our drivers, from me, from our staff, go to our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, type in SISU Energy LLC. We have some videos upwards of 10, 12 minutes long from our drivers, from our staff, from myself, talks about how we do what we do, and gives you some more information. you can go to, Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. We have, pictures, but if you want, really to dive into what we're doing, I'd check out the YouTube channel and probably go to our webpage.
Jim, thank you so much for all the information. It was really super helpful to understand from your perspective what's happening in the industry.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, everybody, that was Jim Grundy, and I hope you found that as fascinating as I found. There was so much information there. Check out Jim Grundy at SISU Energy, spread the word. And if you like this content, stay tuned. We have a lot of great guests coming up. All right, everybody, see you next week.